So in the last few discussions, we've been focused very heavily on the personhood of the fetus and its right to life. And what we did is we tried to figure out whether or not the fetus was in fact a person, because a lot seemed to hinge on that. If it is a person, it has a right to life. And that's going to impose some very stringent duties on us and determine what we can and can't do to the fetus. On the other hand, if the fetus lacks a right to life, that also seems like it's going to have huge implications for the abortion debate. What we're going to do in this video lecture is turn to a second related and very important topic of conversation in the abortion debate, and that is a debate about the competing rights and interests of the fetus and the mother. A lot of times you'll hear this issue come up in common discussion about abortion, where women will say things like, well, it's my body, my right. Now, as I said before when we covered some of the common arguments for or against abortion, there's a way of expressing this point that's not a very good argument to make. For instance, if a woman says that the fetus is just a part of her body, well, that's not a very interesting argument, because someone who's pro-life is not going to accept the premise that the fetus is merely a part of her body. Someone who's pro-life is going to say that the fetus is a separate organism that's attached to her body. What we're going to do in this class, in this lecture and the next one, is we're going to look at a version of this argument that doesn't presuppose anything that the pro-life person wouldn't be willing to accept. In fact, this argument is going to be interesting because it's going to actually grant what the person who's pro-life wants to say, which is that the fetus is a person, but argue that nonetheless it doesn't have a right to use the mother's body and that abortion is permissible. So it's going to be a much more, I don't know necessarily convincing, but a much more powerful argument, primarily because it doesn't begin on a disputed premise. It doesn't begin with a premise that your opponent would reject. In fact, it begins with premises your opponent would accept. And for that reason, it's a stronger argument. Now, in this discussion thus far, we focus very extensively on the right to life, which, as I defined, is a right not to be unjustly killed. The present conversation that we're turning to now is going to be focused on different right that people have. And this is a right of individual autonomy, a right to use your body as you see fit. I just expressed that kind of poorly. Let me clarify a little bit. Most everybody is willing to grant that as a person we have a right to use our body as we see fit. And the reason we have a right to use our body as we see fit falls under a broader right that we have of individual autonomy. The right to individual autonomy is a right for self-determination, to live one's life as one sees fit. And we recognize that people do possess such a right. At least at a certain age. We don't typically regard children as having a right to lead the kind of lives they want. For instance, if your 5-year-old came to you and said that they wanted to start smoking cigarettes, you'd probably tell them that they weren't allowed. Or if your 5-year-old said that they wanted to start drinking alcohol, you'd tell them they weren't allowed. They don't have that right. But once they enter adulthood, they would have that right. I don't know, maybe some of you think even once as long as they're living in your house under your rules, they don't have that right, but that's a conversation for another time. But most adults, we do recognize, have this right to lead the kind of life they want. And as part of this right to lead the kind of life that they want, they're allowed to use their body in ways that they see fit. Now, what I want to do is I want to try to figure out exactly what this right amounts to. Much like when we talked about a right to life, we had to analyze it a little bit. And the way I want to approach this, the way I want to analyze this right, is by just asking, what does the right to use one's body as they see fit, what does that entail? What specific kind of actions are they allowed to perform on the basis of this particular right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give you some examples and ask you, and you have to just kind of ask yourself, do these examples, do these kinds of actions seem like they're morally permissible on the basis of this right to lead one's life and to do with one's body as he or she sees fit? And so we'll walk through some of these examples right now. And here's the first one. Do you think that it is morally permissible for someone, all right ladies, calm down, I know this picture's a little distracting, but pay attention. But do you think it's morally permissible for someone to get tattoos? Do you think it's morally permissible for someone to cover their body from head to toe in tattoos, for instance? Is that allowed? And yeah, I know there might be religious arguments that oppose this, and there might be some practical reasons that people oppose this. But I think most people nowadays are willing to concede that, yeah, if you want to get a tattoo, it's your body. You can do with it as you see fit. Now, like I said, there might be some religious arguments against this, and sometimes you do hear people say, well, your body is not yours, it belongs to God, and so therefore God says you shouldn't get a tattoo, and so therefore you shouldn't. Now, that's an argument against tattoos. However, notice that that argument presupposes that you don't have bodily rights, that you lack certain bodily rights because your body doesn't belong to you. But when we're trying to just offer a secular-based argument, your body is yours and you can do with it as you see fit, and on the basis of that, you should be allowed to cover your body head to toe in tattoos. There's also a practical argument, a pragmatic argument you might make against getting tattoos, which is just that, well, if you get tattoos, they're going to hinder you in life. Now, you go into a job interview, you're going to be perceived negatively if you have tattoos all over your body, especially if you have face tattoos, that you're going to be perceived negatively. It's going to hinder you from getting a job. And maybe that's true. Let's just grant that's true. But that doesn't object to the moral permissibility of getting a tattoo. Yeah, it might obstruct certain job opportunities. It might hinder you in certain ways. But it's still morally permissible to do it. Why is it morally permissible? Well, quite frankly, because it's your body and you can do with your body as you see fit. So I think most people would be willing to concede that. Alright, so let's turn to another example. Is it permissible to smoke cigarettes, morally speaking? Now, we're not asking legally, we're asking morally. Does someone do anything immoral by smoking? Well, again, there are arguments that can be made that your body is not yours. You might, like, for instance, some people say, well, your body is the temple of the Lord, and smoking, it damages this temple, and so, therefore, smoking is wrong. But as long as we're not approaching it with that kind of religious framework in mind, it seems like, well, it's your body. You can do with your body as you see fit. Smoking, you're just harming your body, and who is somebody else to tell you that you can't harm your body? It's yours. You can do with it whatever you want. Now, of course, you can't smoke and blow smoke in other people's face, but as long as you're doing it, in the privacy of your house, who's someone else to tell you that you can't? And in fact, a lot of people will extend this argument and say even the use of hard drugs, you should be allowed to use hard drugs if you want to, on the simple basis that it's your body. And it's your body, it belongs to you. Who's someone else to tell you that you can't do with your possessions as you see fit? Think about this. I own a car. It's a brand new car, it's only a year old, but it's mine. I own it. So who's somebody else to tell me that I can't take a sledgehammer and beat it all to hell if I wanted to? Well, I own my body too, right? So who's to say I couldn't, if I wanted to, smoke cigarettes? And smoking is very bad for me, but it's mine. It belongs to me. It's my property. So who's someone to tell me that I can't? So again, this seems like it's something that would be morally justifiable for the simple reason that it's mine. It belongs to me. Well, let's extend this even more. Would it be permissible for me to convert myself into Catman? And now this is a real guy. This isn't, photoshopped or anything. And as you can see in this image right here, this guy's had major reconstructive surgery. Whoopsie. And he's had his lip altered to look like a cat. He's had fangs put in. You can see here he's had studs put in right here. He can remove those studs and actually pull whiskers through his lip. He's had his cheeks altered, his brow altered, and obviously tattoos placed all over his face so that he looks like a cat. In fact, he's had studs put in up here too for, I guess, also to aid in the appearance of looking like a cat. Now, in my mind, this is foolishness. In my mind, this is silly. In my mind, this is a lot of money that could have been spent on something better. In my mind, this is going to really hinder any kind of employment opportunities that this person might seek, but it's not my life. It's his. I would never do it. I would consider this just the epitome of irrationality, but it's his life. It's his body. and I have no right to tell him what he can and can't do. Again, as irrational as this action might seem, as disgusting as it might seem to some of you, it is his body, and he can do with his body as he sees fit. So I'm going to give you one more example. Actually, two more. Here's a woman, and you can see she's got leg braces on, and she rides in a wheelchair. But here's the thing about her. There's nothing wrong with her legs. Her legs work perfectly fine. However, she identifies with being disabled, and she actually wants a surgeon to sever her spine so that she'll be paralyzed from the waist down. Now, as it stands, she has not found a doctor willing to do this. Every doctor's like, no, there's no way in hell I'm doing that. But here's a question. If she could find a doctor who's willing to do it, or if she was just willing to do it to herself, is it moral for her to have her spine severed, or to sever her spine so that she can make herself paralyzed? Now again, you might say something like, well, no, because, well, she's going to be a drain on society in some kind of way. But let's just rule that out of consideration. Let's suppose that she's financially stable where she can take care of herself. If that's the case, actually, she wouldn't be a drain on society. She might, in fact, even create jobs, because she might need a caregiver that she could pay for. So far from being a drain on society, she could use that money to create a job in the form of someone who's now taking care of her. The question here is, does she do anything immoral by doing this, by having this kind of surgery? And my feelings are conflicted on the matter, but here's an argument that can be made to the effect that no, she does nothing wrong, and it's just this. It's her body, her life. She should be able to do with it as she sees fit. And hopefully you can see from these examples that I've provided is that this right to lead the life as you see fit, and more particularly the right to use your body as you see fit, it too, much like the right to life, is a very strong right. It enables you to do a lot of things, many of which are just straight up irrational. Convert yourself into Catman. Smoking cigarettes is extremely irrational. Sorry to offend any of you, but it really is. It's irrational because of what damage you do to your body. It's converting yourself into Catman. It's something irrational about that. Permanently paralyzing yourself. There's something obviously irrational about that. But you're allowed to do these things, morally speaking, primarily because it is your life, it is your body, and you should be able to do with it as you see fit. Now let me give you, this is the final example. Am I allowed to punch another person in the face because it's my body, it's my right? Think about this. Suppose someone punched you in the face and you said, hey, why did you do that? And then they said, hey, it's my body. I should be allowed to use my body as I see fit. Who are you to tell me I can't punch another person in the face? I was just swinging my fist around and your face happened to get in the way. Now, would any of you find this kind of argument persuasive? Now, looking back at the other examples, the tattoos, the cigarette, Catman, the paralysis, even if you disagreed with some of these, maybe you disagree with, for instance, paralyzing yourself, you could at least kind of conceive how the argument would go. And you're like, yeah, okay, I see where the argument is coming from. It's your body, you should be able to do with it as you see fit. Would that be at all plausible in this case right here? Could you plausibly make the argument that you have a right to punch someone in the face because it's your body and you should be allowed to use your body as you see fit? And the answer to that, I think, is no. No one would buy this at all. No one would be willing to accept this argument. No one would say, yeah, hey, it's your body, you can do with it as you see fit. And, that means getting tattoos or cigarettes or Catman or punching someone in the face. It's your body. Now, what does this reveal? And I know this is kind of an obvious point to a lot of you, but it's a point that we have to make in order to advance this conversation another step. What does this reveal? What's different about punching someone in the face versus tattoos, cigarettes, Catman, and paralysis? What's different here? And the answer to that, I think, is fairly obvious, is that while the right to use your body as you see fit is a very strong right, it provides you with a great deal of protections. It enables you to perform a lot of different actions. It's not an unrestricted right that you can do anything, anywhere, anytime you want. Nobody has a right to use their body as they see fit in any way they see fit. There are restrictions on how you can use your body, and the restrictions are going to be determined by how the use of your body affects other people. You're allowed to use your body as you see fit unless the exercise of your body harms another person. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, he was a Supreme Court justice, he famously said, "The right to swing my fist ends where the other man's nose begins." And this is really, really important here, because a lot of times when we start having this conversation about abortion, when we start having this conversation, you'll hear people kind of, I don't want to say mindlessly, but without much thought, just say, well, it's my body, I can do with it as I see fit. And that's not true at all. That's just not true at all. You cannot use your body any way you see fit. You can use your body any way you see fit unless the use of your body harms another person. But once it starts to harm another person, then you're not allowed to use it any way you see fit. And because of this, because the rights of bodily use are limited in this way, the debate about abortion is greatly impacted. And so many people who've been defenders of pro-life have argued that abortion is wrong. Why? Well, because quite obviously, the use of a woman's body, if the fetus is a person, harms the fetus. And so what people have said over the years when debating about abortion is, hey, look, we have basically a conflict of rights here. The woman has a right to use her body. The woman's bodily right is very strong. However, the woman's bodily right conflicts with the fetus's right to life, assuming the fetus is a person. This is what people who are pro-life have said. It conflicts with the fetus's right to life. And when these rights conflict with one another, when bodily rights conflict with right to life, the right to life obviously wins out. For all the same reasons that bodily rights lose when it comes to punching another person in the face. You're allowed to use your body as you see fit until the exercise of your bodily right harms another individual. And so this has been, I think, this kind of thinking has been in place, and why so many people have thought that the issue of abortion was solely an issue of whether or not the fetus was a person. Because if the fetus is a person, then it has a right to life. And so this whole talk of, well, it's my body, my right, would just be completely irrelevant. The fact that it's your body, it's your right, it would have no bearing, it would have no importance at all, or it would just be a completely less severe right than the right to life. And yeah, there's an article I wanted you guys to read. It was written by a person who's pro-life named Francis Beckwith, and this is what he says. He says just this: certainly a woman has a right to control her body, but the unborn entity is not a part of her body. Hence, abortion is not justified, because no one's right to personal autonomy is so strong that it permits the arbitrary execution of others. And that's what's critical here. For the pro-life position, why they have focused so much on whether or not the fetus is a person. In fact, why everybody has focused, even pro-choice people have focused so much. Because most people, once they give it a moment's thought, they realize that, yeah, the woman has a right to use her body, but if the fetus is a person, that right to use your body will not win out over the fetus's right to life. And we can summarize the kind of thinking process here in the following way. A right to life always trumps bodily rights. A fetus is a person and so has a right to life. Therefore, the fetus's right to life trumps the mother's bodily rights. Therefore, abortion is not permissible. And everyone in the long history of debate on abortion, not everyone, but a vast majority of people, have focused on premise 2 here and defending that. Most everybody, when they've talked about this, have just granted, number 1, that a right to life always trumps bodily rights. And what has been the focus of discussion has been whether or not the fetus is a person. Now, I'd asked you guys to read an essay by Judith Thompson, and it's a very, very weird essay. I'm going to concede that it's very weird. But what's so fantastic about it is that Thompson, she grants premise 2. What Thompson says is that the fetus is a person, and the fetus has a right to life. And what she attacks is premise 1. A right to life always trumps bodily rights. And her argument is extremely interesting. And the reason it's so interesting is because what Thompson basically, she wants to defend a very liberal pro-choice position. But what's so interesting about her position is just this. And what's so interesting, I should say, about her argument is just this. Is that she says to the pro-life people, hey, pro-life people, I'm going to grant you every single thing you've ever wanted. I'm going to grant that the fetus is a person. I'm going to grant that it has a right to life. I'm going to give you everything you want. And I'm still going to prove that you're wrong. And that's the most powerful argument that can be made. She's not going to quibble about whether or not a fetus is a person. Yeah, sure, whatever, it is. I mean, she doesn't really believe it is, but she's going to say, for the sake of argument, yeah, I'll let you have that. I'll let you have that. But I'm still going to prove that you're wrong. So this is what Thompson is going to be addressing here. This is what she's going to be focused on. And she's going to argue that a right to life does not always trump bodily rights. So, it's one thing to make that claim, but it's another thing to make the argument. So, what is Thompson's argument? And I have to confess, it's a little weird, but I think it's something that you can follow. And here it is. What Thompson says is just this. She says, suppose that you go to sleep one night, and in the middle of the night, you're abducted, and you wake up in a hospital somewhere, and you're strapped to a table, and you notice just all these tubes and wires are coming out of you, and you look over, and you notice that they're going into another person. This other person just happens to be the world's most famous violinist. Why she picked the world's most famous violinist, I have no idea. But let's just say it's the world's most famous violinist. Maybe she had some classical music on when she was writing this essay. And you're wondering, what in the world is going on? And you ask the doctors. You say, doctors, what's going on? And they say, hey, look, so here's the deal. This is the world's most famous violinist. And the problem is she has this rare kidney disease. And there's poison in her kidneys, and she's dying. And she's going to be dead any minute now. And we scoured the world over, and we were looking for someone who could help us out here. And there's only one person in the entire world, and that just happens to be you. And you have, certain blood type or certain genetics or whatever, where we can attach you to the violinist, and we can use your kidneys to actually pump the poison out of her. We can't use machines to do it. We can't use anything else. No other person will work. For you and you alone, you're just this weird, rare genetic anomaly. We can use your kidneys to pump this poison out of her. Now, no harm is going to come to you. None whatsoever. You'll be fine. There is one little catch here, and the catch is just that you have to stay in this bed for 9 months. You have to stay connected to her for 9 months. It'll slowly pump the poison out. But after this 9-month period, we can detach you. She can go about her way and live her life. You can go about your way and live your life. So that's the scenario as Thompson sets it up. And the question here is, would it be permissible to detach the violinist from you? Could you say to the doctors at that point, oh, hell no, I'm not going to do this. You have to pull me out right. You have to pull these plugs out right now. I did not agree to this. I do not want this. Unplug me and let me out of here. Would it be morally permissible for you to say, pull these plugs out? Or does the violinist have a right to use your body? Could the violinist, here's the question, we can put it this way. Could the violinist say to you, you owe me this. I have a right. You have to stay there. Or do you have permission to tell the violinist, no, I want to detach now? And I think most people when they hear this, most everyone when they hear this, their immediate reaction is to say it is morally permissible to detach the violinist. Very few people, now there are some, but very few people say that you're morally required, that you're obligated, that you do something immoral, and more specifically, that the violinist has a right. The violinist has a legitimate claim to say to you, you owe me this. Very few people are willing to say that. Most everybody says that you have a right to say, no, detach me now. Now, what's the point of all this? Well, here's the point. The violinist is a person, and the violinist, because she's a person, she has a right to life. However, her right to life does not include a right to use your body. Her right to life, she can't, her bodily right does not include a right to use your body. And hence, a right to life does not always trump a person's bodily rights. In this particular case, your bodily right wins out over her right to life. Yes, she has a right to life, but you have a right to your body, and since you didn't grant her a right to use your body, you have every permission in the world to say, no, detach me now. Now, she will die, and this is clear. She will die if you detach, but that is not your responsibility. That is not your concern. Her right to life does not include and does not trump your bodily right. And so right here, Thompson has already, just through this example, this thought experiment, demonstrated that premise one of the argument we were just looking at is false. Now, what Thompson is constructing here is what we call an argument by analogy. And it's fairly clear where she wants to go with this. She wants to draw a connection between the violinist and pregnancy. And we can lay out the argument. She doesn't do this, but we can lay out the argument that she's trying to make. And here it is. It is permissible to detach the violinist since you did not consent to letting her use your body. Pregnancy is like being hooked to the violinist. Hence, it is permissible to detach a fetus. Detaching a fetus is equivalent to having an abortion, and hence abortion is permissible. And so this is the main argument that Thompson is making in her paper. She makes a number of other little arguments along the way, and we'll talk about some of those in the next video lecture. But this is the main argument that Thompson is making. And what she's trying to do, and the reason this argument is so interesting and so powerful, is she just basically created this example of the violinist, which is weird. I'll concede that. Everybody will concede that. Thompson will concede that. But it illustrates a very important point about the fact that a right to life doesn't always win out over bodily rights. And once you're willing to acknowledge that a right to life doesn't always win out, then you can apply that same kind of reasoning to the case of abortion. And this is what Thompson is trying to do here. Now, I imagine that a lot of you are already thinking, oh, this isn't like abortion at all. And a lot of you are already focused on premise number 2 here. And I think there's a lot of objections that people raise to premise number 2. And a lot of you might be saying, no, pregnancy is not like the violinist at all. And what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to look at some potential problems with premise number 2 and how Judith Thompson responds to those problems. But right now, what I've just wanted to do is go over the basics of her argument. And in the next video, what we're going to do is look at some problems and look a little more deeply into how she responds to all of these potential problems.